Jammin' Jack Connor will take on the Triple Crown champion, Davey Cash. But our next match is going to be kind of big here, folks. Nick Marchand, the carrier of the case, a guaranteed title match whenever he wishes to cash that in. It's going to take on Frank the Crank, RWA rookie, and a guy looking for really his first big win. Frank the Crank has had a lot of tough luck losses. And I tell you what, folks, the way Nick Marchand is walking in, aside from being taunted, I don't think he's taking Frank the Crank seriously. Tell you what, Nick Marchand must be happy that the Denver Broncos are the AFC champions and will face the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. We're here to talk about wrestling. And Marchand looks to have the same side of offensive prowess as Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos did in the dominance against the New England Patriots. Well, it's the AFC Championship all over again. Frank the Crank, 275, almost 7 feet tall. Firing up the crowd here. And maybe, just maybe, trying to avenge the loss of the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Michael Santana, sanctioned to officiate this contest. Santana says that Marchand is good. He'll inspect Frank the Crank. Frank the Crank lost to Jack Connor by just 2 votes for the title match here tonight, which would make Nick Marchand third in voting if you're playing at home. Marchand, a kick right to the gut of Frank the Crank, and that just made the man angry. Marchand kicking right away at the knees of Frank the Crank, trying to take the big Sequoia down. Marchand, who already holds a victory over Frank the Crank, just forearming and now just smacking Frank the Crank in the face. Crossbody, nobody home by Nick Marchand. And now big clothesline by Frank the Crank. Back elbow, Frank the Crank really looking like an 80s wrestler, and a big axe handle. Frank the Crank, he's gonna charge. Big splash into the corner. Marchand out on his feet. Huge scoop. And a rib breaker. Look at the strength. And now a slam to Nick Marchand by Frank the Crank. Leg drop to the back of the head. Marchand powders out. Marchand doesn't know what to do. Is he saying he broke his nose? Has Marsha Brady showed up? Nick Marchand doesn't think he's going to be able to be a cheerleader anymore because he broke his nose. And if you got that Brady Bunch reference, folks, you're a lot older than I am. Marchand looking for an Omaha Audible. Frank the Crank is, in all seriousness, Marchand looks like he's really hurt. Michael Santana is checking on Nick Marchand. It looks like Marchand saying that something wrong with his jaw. Marchand right in front of us. Keeps grabbing at his jaw. Now Frank the Crank is going in to check on his opponent. The admirable thing to do. And wait a minute, Nick Marchand played possum the whole time. And Santana, you got to recognize something like that. Supposed to whip Frank the Crank into the post. Frank the Crank sends Marchand right into the ring post. And oh look, the jaw's hurt again. Nick Marchand played possum again, and now just a knee right to Frank the Crank as he's trying to get in the ring. Big drop kick. Finds its mark, and Frank the Crank is down. You know, I know Frank is trying to be, you know, sportsmanship and everything and try to show respect to his opponent, but you can't expect Marchand to do the same as he now fires and hammers Frank the Crank. Marchand now taunting and kicking Frank the Crank, taking him down. Rear chin lock. And just throws Frank the Crank down. It's really too bad because Frank was on top with that big leg drop as Marchand pouted out and really feigned a major injury, almost a broken jaw possibly. Now Marchand just raking the eyes, stepping on the eyes of Frank the Crank. That is not how you win a match. And that's why people didn't vote for him, folks. Marchand is just toying with Frank the Crank. DDT takes down Frank the Crank. Now here's a cover. That could be it. 1, 2, and Frank kicks out at 2. And now the push-ups, the push-up chokes as we're used to seeing. Marchand broke at 3 this time. Frank the Crank, just being mocked by Nick Marchand. And again, a rake of the eyes. Unreal. Marchand showing no respect to this young rookie. And quite honestly, it's when you do that you make mistakes. Marchand just knees Frank right in the face and kicks the man down. Marchand just mocking now with a pin. Cover 1, 2. Chris Jericho invented that cover. Marchand just toying as Frank tries to get a forearm in. And the big Sequoia looks like he's getting angry. There's pushing Marchand back into the corner. Going for a clothesline. It takes down Nick Marchand. Frank says he's cranking it up. In the corner, nobody home, goes to that big boot. And Frank's hurt. Marchand now smells blood in the water, taking out the knee of Frank the Crank, ripping the padding down, and just hammering the knee of Frank the Crank. Marchand knows he can put this match away. He's just toying with Frank the Crank now. Now another kick right to the knee. Height advantage definitely taken away at this point. Marchand looks like he's lining up Frank. And now going for that double knee. And Frank off the ropes. Here comes the, what a huge boot! He catches Marchand. Here's a cover. 1, 2, he did it! Frank the Crank, his first RWA victory. Marchand won a match with that double knee a couple of months ago, and Frank the Crank saw it coming and then just fed Marchand a huge boot. And Frank the Crank has overcome the odds here tonight. What a great victory for Frank the Crank. Marchand can't believe himself, can't believe it. Great win for Frank the Crank. Tell you what, here's a guy that's made little mistakes and has learned from them as he's still feigning that knee injury.
That's what you got to call Marchand.
Well, folks, when we come back, Tom Billington is looking for a new tag team partner. Pat McIntosh is injured and he's out for the foreseeable future. He's enlisted the help of Tommy Trainwreck, and they're going to team up against Self-Made Money, and that match is next.